Hi, my name is Kimberly Tan. I'm an investing partner at Andreessen Horowitz, and I'm very excited to be moderating the session today on AI applications in the enterprise and how you actually make it work. I'm joined today by two of the leading enterprise AI companies today, Decagon and Clay. I'm sure a lot of you in the audience have heard about these two companies already, but in case you haven't, Decagon is an AI agent company that builds AI agents for customer support and have really rethought how you actually do support from the ground up. I think a lot of people have historically viewed support as a cost center in companies, and they have really decided with AI, you can actually deliver a concierge customer experience for all your customers and have really rethought how to do that. Today, they serve enterprises like Hertz, Chime, and Duolingo, just to name a couple. Clay, for those of you who don't know, is an AI go-to-market company that helps people turn their growth ideas into reality by using data enrichment or intent signals for go-to-market into automated actions. Their initial idea to do so was actually founded pre-AI, but they're one of the companies that has leveraged AI the best in the new wave and serve companies like HubSpot, Canva, and OpenAI itself. I've had the privilege of knowing both of the founders for years. We at Andreessen Horowitz led the seed round of Decagon a little over 2 years ago, and I've known Varun, the co-founder, for over 4 years. So very happy to call them both friends, and very excited to welcome them on the stage today. So welcome Jesse and Varun, the co-founders of Decagon and Clay.
Right. Oh, we can go.
Oh, wow, okay.
We're friends for 4 years.
Great, well, maybe just to kick it off, I'd love to hear from both of you, maybe Varun, you first, then Jesse, you second, about just the initial idea of why you wanted to build your companies and how you thought about using AI in order to do so.
Well, the original intent for Clay was actually how can you build how can you give people an order of magnitude more power and how they can, the power of programming to an order of magnitude more people. And initially, there was a much more horizontal vision. And actually, the original use case of Clay that gathered like commercial traction was data enrichment for cold email marketing agencies. If anyone here is starting a company, I wouldn't recommend pitching Kimberly on that. That probably wouldn't get funded. And then over time, we were able to evolve that into the go-to-market platform that we have right now. I think, ex post facto, it's like very easy to see the things that changed. In the moment, we were just taking one step at a time. But I think AI has actually changed a couple of things in our market. One, it's actually enabled usage-based pricing, which makes it so that in go-to-market, you don't have to charge by seat, which means you don't have to charge by rep. So that means you can actually cater to a more technical, elevated audience like RevOps or growth, so that you can build systems around go-to-market. And then I think AI has also changed it so that sales is no longer one-to-one. It's now one-to-many. And so you can now build systems for growth using Clay. And so I think AI has made these changes that have helped Clay really grow.
Yeah, our founding story was relatively straightforward. So I started a company before this that was a consumer company, also a 16Z company, and we grew it fairly quickly, but we didn't have any revenue at the time. It was just pure users, and we had a lot of users. And of course, when you have a lot of users, they write in, there's like issues with this, or they have questions and so on. So I had some empathy and some sort of experience with the customer support problem, but I would say that alone didn't really inform this company. When we started this company, we really just did customer discovery. And so we talked to a bunch of customers. We didn't really come in with any sort of preconceived notion of what we wanted to do. And then when we talked to a lot of customers, and these were generally larger companies, mostly tech companies to start out, we just explored a bunch of use cases with them. Support kept coming up because we were trying to think, how could Gen AI agents be helpful, and how would you measure the ROI, and so on. And it just turns out that the nature of customer service as a problem is very well suited for Gen AI, and you can also measure the impact that it's having very easily. And so we just felt a lot of pull there, and that's when Ashwin and I decided to commit to this idea. And luckily this time, as we started building, it's just everything has gone fairly smoothly, and we've been able to get more and more customers. And then we partnered with Kimberly, and then things went downhill from there. But
Well, but backstage, they were joking because Kimberly got married, and the co-founder, Jesse's co-founder, was the officiant, and so he was knocked out for a full week. So
I did get him sick.
Yeah.
I feel very bad about that.
Yeah.
So my co-founder was gone for a week because he had to go to Kimberly's wedding, and then afterwards he was deathly ill for another week.
yeah,
So-
this is a value-add investor right here.
On that note, I'm going to start with a couple of questions, but obviously this is an AMA, so that's just to see the grounds for a little bit, but please use the open for questions thread in this session in order to make this a true AMA.
By the way, the OpenAI people said no one is asking questions in the Discord, so they have canned questions if people don't ask. So please ask questions in the Discord so we can engage lively, you know? So it's a good conversation.
Awesome. So maybe just to get started, I know one of the big challenges with building AI products today is just the pace at which the market moves, like new models coming out, et cetera. So how do you actually, in your companies, assess the capabilities of the new models and know what you want to leverage for your own products while also being able to keep your infrastructure flexible enough to actually adapt to the new models and capabilities? Maybe, Jesse, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, so our agent, you can kind of think of its goal is to do everything a human support agent would do, and ideally more as well, as you can be proactive, it can talk to more people and so on, but there's a lot of different surface areas, so there's a lot of different points where you call models. And what you want to do is you generally want to come up with a set of evaluations for every single type of those use cases. And so an example might be, as part of the agent, there is one model call that detects if it's going off the rails or if it's going off topic or so on. And so that could be like a small model call. And if a new model comes out, then we want to be able to very quickly run that through our test and see, is this performing better or worse than the current benchmark? And same thing for everything, really. I think the one nuance for us is that the evals could change from customer to customer. And so actually, as part of our product, we allow our customers to define their own evals, and they have their own test sets, and they have their own, they're almost like unit tests for them to make sure that their common use cases are still passing correctly. And so generally, when a new model comes out, we have our team that goes in and just runs a bunch of these evals, and they kind of draw some sort of conclusion around if it's working well or not. If it is, then what we'll do is we'll kind of roll it out as an A/B test. And so our customers have the ability to be like, oh, okay, I want to try GPT-5, for example. Like, all right, I'm going to roll that out to 10% of my audience first. And then, okay, that's looking good. Let's roll it up to 50 and so on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for us, on the infrastructure piece, how to keep that flexible. Actually, from the very beginning, my co-founder Kareem built it so that actually the integrations that we create, the models that we add is actually almost separate from most of the code base and the core product team. So it allows for us to be super fast in how we iterate really quickly and how we add new integrations, and they don't have to consult with the core product or the code base in that way. So that was a decision we made 7-8 years ago when we built the product that allows us to move this quickly. In terms of how we stay up to date with all these models and how we think about it, first of all, I'm not doing too much of that. Actually, Mark and Jeff over there, who Mark's the one with the mane of hair. He'll let it down for you if you ask nicely. They lead a bunch of our AI teams, and basically what they do, and the rest of a bunch of other engineers do, is look, we're all we're watching the keynotes here, we're reading the same news that all of you are. But I think also we're looking at what our users do. So for example, we launched Clayagent, our web research agent, 2 or 3 years ago, and now it has billions of runs. And at that moment, they saw that this React paper came out, so maybe the technology was possible, but they were also looking at what our users are doing, right? And so our users are, they were doing these agent loops, and so they were doing they were doing GPT-3 pulls, they were doing Google searches, they were scraping websites, and I was like, okay, well maybe we can sequence that together and turn that into a web agent. And so that's kind of how we iterate. And today, a couple of weeks ago, we launched Sculptor, which is our conversational AI copilot, and we're hoping that the reasoning improvements in the models continue to make that better, and we made that product the same way we make Clayagent.
I know one of the main issues when you build AI for the enterprise is that enterprises need guardrails, right? So how do you guys think about how both CIOs, CTOs, any exec should balance the desire to experiment with AI and the importance of doing so with actually having proper guardrails in place?
I can go first. So It is a very non-trivial problem because when you're selling to the enterprise, different stakeholders at the companies care about different things. They might be accountable for different things, and one of those people is probably accountable for the AI not messing up. And in our use case, we are customer facing, and so that is quite important. You never want to say something you're not supposed to, and so on. So there's a couple of different points I would make on this. I mean, the first is that as you're building, it is very important to make sure that you can enforce guardrails and make sure that you can set those guardrails and customize them. One of our big differentiators and sort of like the positioning we've had in the market is that we make it really easy for non-technical people to self-serve their customization of the agent and build new things and iterate and so on. And so part of doing that is being able to enforce guardrails and add their own guardrails. And so we created a format that we call AOPs, Agent Operating Procedures, and they're kind of like SOPs, but for the AI. And that is helpful because now we don't have to be responsible for figuring out what all the guardrails are and like making sure we do all the discovery. Like they get to put in some of the guardrails themselves. The other point I would make is I think there is a little bit of transition that's happening where when AI agents were first released in the enterprise, there was a bit of like the Waymo syndrome where people are like, oh, if Waymo just makes one mistake, that becomes newsworthy and that's really bad. But in reality, of course, it's way safer than human drivers. So I think with AI, there is a bit of a shift now where people, instead of looking for one-off errors, they're thinking more about like error rates. And the error rates that you'll see should be dramatically less than the human error rates. And that's also one way to quantify risk for these companies.
Yeah, I think we do something similar with the operating procedures and giving the responsibility to users in our product as well. I think I think a lot of companies have shared publicly about how they try to keep like their core features away from the AI coding, but obviously you want to keep that. Things are changing so much in this space, so you want to be able to iterate quickly, adapt quickly. Internally, actually, some of our best features have come from vibe coding, have come from hackathons, and so you want to create space for that, but every company is going to have a different balance, and it's hard to say what is appropriate for Clay and Decagon could be appropriate for you. I think that every company, like for example, Decagon caters to much more enterprise customers than we do. They have different types of agreements that they've made and different types of conditions in their contracts that they have to be compliant with than we do. And so I think it's just a balance, and then you keep adding those governance and risk controls as you scale, get bigger customers, and make more contractual commitments.
Awesome. And I'm sure like a lot of the times as you're trying to enter these enterprises, you probably do pilots or initial deployments. And I know there's sort of like a statistic or a meme out there that 95% of deployments in the enterprise today fail. I'm curious if you have any ideas for like what the main points of failure are when somebody is trying to experiment with AI, and how you think that people should actually make AI deployment successful.
Yeah, I think in go-to-market, what we see actually is that, look, in go-to-market, basically you have traditional orgs operating in silos, right? With SDRs prospecting and AEs closing deals and RevOps maintaining systems. What we actually see the most cutting-edge teams do is they operate their go-to-market teams like product teams. And so you have like these go-to-market engineers that are building systems on behalf of all the reps and scaling their most creative ideas. And so what does that mean in practice? So I'll give you an example. One of our customers, Canva, that Kimberly mentioned, one of the products helps you keep all your brand content consistent across lots of different social channels. So someone had an idea, it turns out that you can use Clay to do social listening at scale, use AI to analyze those social posts, determine what's off-brand and on-brand based on brand guidelines, and then message the head of brand and be like, hey, this is off-brand, you should use our product. That's timely, it comes with a solution, it's very clever, and you can scale that across thousands of customers. Another approach is you could try to actually improve the data that you have and then make workflows on top of that. So Plaid, for an example, they categorized all their companies into 75 very, very precise industries and subcategories, and then use that to develop agentic workflows and marketing campaigns. So I think those are different approaches on how you can go about it and go to market. I think the last point, just to be very tactical about things that companies do and don't do with AI deployments. I think the best ones treat it like product launches, right? Start small, do betas, expand from there. I think they only use, they're smart about where they get their data from for what's publicly available, and they make sure they have a human in the loop first.
Yeah, I mean, we see something similar. I often talk about there's two big criteria that we have to satisfy, or any AI agent has to satisfy when you're selling to the enterprise. The first is that the ROI has to be very quantifiable. And if we get to the end of a pilot and like people are unclear like what actually happened or how much money are they going to save or how much more money are they going to make, then it's going to be a really tough sell because they have a bunch of other priorities. They have probably a bunch of ideas of how to leverage AI. And so for us, even if they test it and they're like, oh, this is really cool, like we can definitely answer more things than we can before. If they can't quantify it, it's a tough business case. And so all of our deployments are centered around like, okay, how can you show that we are now resolving way more tickets than before, and you need less humans as a result of that. And not only that, your customer satisfaction or your NPS score has gone up a ton. And so that is basically like proof that this is doing well. The other metric I would say is more of a flexibility type thing, where if you have to be perfect before you can go live, and you have to basically test a bunch of things and get accuracy to be near 100% and roll out to all the users, then it's also very tough to go live. But if you can kind of break it down into smaller problems and go live to a portion of users first, and customer service has this nice property that you can always escalate to a human, and so that helps a lot with people feeling comfortable going live in production. And so if you have the flexibility to go live into production faster, then that's also very helpful.
So one question from the audience that I'd be curious for both of your thoughts about is, AI is a very crowded market today. There's lots of people who do very similar sounding things. How do you guys both think about proving that your product is better and that it actually stands out relative to the competition? Varun, do you want to go first this time?
Sure. So go-to-market is this funny space where it's actually the most crowded in some ways because it's the biggest market in some ways. But we actually don't find too much competition also because we are going down a unique lane. And in fact, Jesse and I were just talking about this backstage as well in terms of how we think about our competition. And so for us, we actually start with data as the wedge when we go sell into enterprises. And what's nice about that is it's very quantitative. It's very clear because you can run a data test to determine who's better. And there's a subset of competitors for that. And we win because we aggregate all the vendors and we use AI in creative ways to find net new data points that you can't get elsewhere and to clean the data programmatically. So we do that, and then you can compare it very clearly. And then once we win on that basis, then we use Clay to automate a lot of interesting workflows. And so I think that's like a wedge that we use to differentiate in a very clear way that's numerical.
Yeah, so I would say similar. I mean, customer service is one of the most obvious use cases of AI, and so there's a lot of noise in the market, I would say. And when we first started, we were almost like, oh, maybe we shouldn't work on this because, like, there must be a reason why it hasn't been built yet, or there's going to be a ton of incumbents and so on. And it always looks noisier from the outside when you're actually competing. I think for us, there are of course a lot of big platforms, right? Like Google and Salesforce and the labs and so on, where they will do things that are related to the space. And generally, the mindset I think, for us at least, is that you have to win on product at the end of the day. And if you don't, then you don't really deserve the win anyways. If you can't outcompete the big companies on product. If you do, then it's like a heavy execution game, and so we do a lot to differentiate on product. A big part of it is what I mentioned before, like really being able to up-level the non-technical users and democratize the ability to work with these agents. But yeah, maybe in 6 months it'll be something else, or a year it'll be something else, and it's really just about execution and pace right now.
Just to build on what Jesse was saying, by the way, like if you're not differentiating in a real way, then he's right. It's just a rat race. It's just like execution, and you don't want to get into that. And so I think the way not to get into that is you have to think about the problem differently. You have to have like a different philosophy and a different mindset on how you think about the space in the market. So to take our market, for example, there are different philosophies on how you can go about this, right? You could say, hey, we want to actually incrementally improve every rep with AI. You could say, hey, we want to actually use AI to automate the entire life cycle. What we say is actually, hey, we want to use AI, but actually cater to one set of people, GTM engineers, RevOps people, give them these primitives and help them use AI on behalf of the rest of the company and scale the most creative ideas and scale away the manual work. And so I think if you have like a different way you're looking at the market, then I think that can also help you really differentiate.
And in Decagon's case, is that differentiated point of view the ability to empower non-technical builders, or would you describe it slightly differently?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the previous generation of SaaS, Salesforce is very successful at this. A lot of companies are very successful at this. It's more about like, hey, let's invent our own configuration language and build an ecosystem of technical people that can come in and build the configuration. In the context of customer service, this usually looks like building a big decision tree almost of if this happens, do this. And it's quite powerful, but as you can imagine, it's very slow and expensive to build and maintain. And our whole viewpoint is that because Gen AI models are very good now, it unlocks almost like a different way of building software, where you can use natural language more, you can be more instruction-based, you can kind of configure things just by describing it and writing these agent operating procedures in our case. And it just creates a little bit of different paradigm, and the end result is that you're able to get all these business users who previously would have been waiting on engineering resources to do something, that they can now go in and do a lot. They can both configure the AI, they can run A/B tests, they can analyze the results, they can iterate on different types of models, for example, that we were talking about before, and that's been the unlock for us.
I think one other thing that's quite unique about both Clay and Decagon is, unlike I think a lot of AI companies today, you actually service a large range of different types of industries. Like, you're much more horizontal in that point of view. So I'm curious how you guys think about going deep in one vertical or one industry and deepening the product there versus creating things that are broadly applicable across industries. Maybe Varun, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. We get this question all the time, actually, with investors mostly, where they're like, oh, you should do other industries. And then it's like this funny catch-22, where they're like, oh, you want to do more industries? But then if you do more industries, they're like, oh, there's not enough depth in this one thing, right? So I think for us, we see a lot of opportunity just in technology alone, just to start with. Now, we have other customers across lots of other industries, like recently Waste Management even signed up, right? State Department uses Clay. So there's a lot of diversity, but let's start with the lowest hanging fruit. And we know we can help technology companies that are B2B the most, so let's start with that. And then after we really penetrate that market very deeply and feel really, really good, and then go all the way up, right? Because you start small. You start with SMBs, you start with mid-market startups, you start with later stage companies, then you go to enterprises, right? Then you go to non-digitally native enterprises, then you can move to other industries. And for us, that would be like finance or healthcare or other things like that. And so that's kind of how we approach it.
I think the horizontal vertical question is kind of product dependent, and our view on it for our space at least is that the winners will be horizontal, because there are nuances between industries, but there's not that many. And fundamentally what people want is roughly the same, which is, can you automate these conversations for me, and can you make the conversations higher quality? And that's the same across vertical. And so if that's the case, maybe in the short term you will see some vertical players, but eventually they'll get consolidated into horizontal ones. And we have, I guess, it just has happened that we've been able to get customers across different verticals, and we haven't really struggled servicing their individual needs. And so that's just the route we've taken. I don't think one is worse than the other.
Got it. Another question in the audience is, like all growth stage companies, you have resource prioritization issues. How do you guys think about, if you had an additional dollar to spend at the moment, would you spend it on product improvements, go-to-market, general community building? Like, how do you think about incremental resource allocation? Jesse, do you
yeah, I would say for us, we've always been pretty go-to-market driven. And in the early days, I think you have to be really go-to-market driven. And in some ways, you're also short-term thinking, because you're just optimizing to get to the next step. Because if you start thinking too long-term in the early days, you just waste a bunch of time, because you could be optimizing for the wrong thing. And then as you grow, I think now we are feeling like it's a bit more balanced, and maybe in the future it'll be more skewed towards product. But I think for us right now, we have a big initial customer base, and there's a ton of customers we still want to go after, and we're talking to them. But we need to start thinking a little bit more long term, because that allows our product to scale, and that allows things to move faster. So I think it changes over time. I think we started a little bit more go-to-market focused. Now we're a little bit more balanced, and who knows what will happen in the future depending on the bottlenecks.
Yeah. I think there's a direct answer and more of a philosophical answer here. The direct answer is we do have incremental dollars. We haven't touched our fundraising for a while, and we don't plan to spend that incremental dollar for a bunch of reasons. But I think the more like philosophical question, like we've always been a product-driven company. We started as a product-led growth motion as well, and will remain a product-driven company. I think now that we have a sales motion that's thriving, there's this temptation to scale the go-to-market really aggressively. And I think I would just, temper that and add caution, because it's fairly easy to scale a go-to-market motion in terms of the hiring of it, because it's just easier to hire go-to-market people than engineers in this competitive market. And I think you run into risks there. You run into risks where you can really paper over real problems in the business that products should be solving with people, and that I think is really tough to resolve. And so for us, like as we scale go-to-market, we're trying to scale engineering one-to-one.
Got it. So we're basically out of time. I'm going to try to squeeze in one last question that hopefully you guys can give a pithy answer to. So someone in the audience wants to know, just if you were to build an enterprise AI company today, what's the top piece of advice that you would give someone?
Yeah, I have kind of a strong view, just from my past experience, that the most important thing is to not over-index on anyone's advice and try to understand yourself a bit more. And I feel like I really fell into this trap in my first company because I was a new grad. I was super inspired by all these stories that other entrepreneurs were having, and you read a bunch of news articles or podcasts and so on, and it's super easy to be like, oh, cool, that's a cool learning. Let me try to apply that to what I'm doing. And it ends up being a waste of time, or you kind of go the wrong direction because of that, because everyone's situation is different. Every founder also has different strengths. People are in different spaces and different stages. And so, yeah, probably the number one thing is just do a little bit more introspection and figure out where your competitive advantages are and what you're strong at and what you're weak at, and go from there.
Yeah. I'd echo a lot of what Jesse said, and just add to really just focus on your natural curiosity and focus on what you find interesting, and not try to plan too far ahead. Don't be like, hey, I want to build a AI enterprise app in support and reverse engineer every step that you think needs to happen to do that. That's not how great companies are built. Just follow what you're curious about, and then take each step from there, and then follow the interestingness from there. And that's what I would probably recommend.
Awesome. Well, if everyone can give a hand to Jesse and Varun, thank you guys so much for joining us.